Electronic spreadsheets, one of the main reasons why personal computers have revolutionized our lives. With the introduction of a spreadsheet called VisiCalc in the late 70s, it finally made sense to buy a personal computer.
Then, with the introduction of Lotus 123, the most successful microcomputer software ever introduced reached the status of an everyday tool for millions of people.
This ability for anyone to build plans, financial analysis, simple budgets, or sophisticated ones with no help from computer experts is directly related to the success of the personal computer industry.
Before spreadsheets for personal computers hit the market, big and little companies had to go to great amounts of time and trouble to prepare financial planning.
The possibility of doing what-if evaluations was difficult at best, and many decisions were made without thorough studies, leaving the possibility of success more to luck than to analyzing trends or examining options. But since the introduction of the spreadsheet for the personal computer, the business place is not the same.
Today, it's difficult to find a personal computer without an electronic spreadsheet nearby. And this video program will show you how the electronic spreadsheet can help you in your everyday tasks, whether at the office or at home.
We will not try to make you a master of 1, 2, 3. No one could deliver that promise through a video program. But what we will accomplish is to allow you to start using 1, 2, 3 and to understand the logic behind it.
We're going to show you how to finally switch from paper, pencil, and the calculator to using 1, 2, 3. And once you finally start using this powerful tool to help you solve simple tasks, other possibilities will open up to you.
Actually, the software industry has been driven by powerful features of the programs intended to please the power users, but most people use only a few of those features.
Also, consumers buy powerful software because it's always good to have the best, just in case those features are ever needed.
There's no problem with that philosophy. However, manuals for those powerful software packages have to deal with all of that power.
And most of us get lost in hundreds of pages of descriptive jargon trying to find out what we really need to know to get started.
This program is a simple approach to start your 1, 2, 3 package and prepare your first financial plan. The printed companion to this program, called Logic Notes, will further aid in expanding your spreadsheet application ability. Also, Logic Notes will give you a clear understanding of how to install your spreadsheet program on a hard disk or how to use it on a floppy disk system.
If you're not already familiar with your computer operating system, how to access files on your disks, or how to copy files, we strongly recommend a video logic program called Using MS-DOS. We mentioned the analogy of the pen and paper and calculator. However, 1, 2, 3 contains more ink than 1,000 pens and can fill hundreds of sheets of paper with numbers and text.
But most plans or analysis that you prepare take very little of these massive capabilities. So let's approach 1, 2, 3 first as a simple calculator, pen and paper.
Before you would drive a totally new car, you would inspect it thoroughly, know the basic instruments as well as the basic security requirements and operating rules and the like, so you wouldn't crash your first time around the block. And although we are going to examine all of the whistles and bells that you really need, first you just start with a blank screen, like a clean sheet of paper.
After you type in 1, 2, 3 at the DOS prompt, you get the first look at Lotus 1, 2, 3. There's a highlighted bar waiting for you in the upper left of the page.
It's like your pencil pointing to the top of your paper. But where you go from here depends on which keys you press on your keyboard. But let's look at the screen a minute.
The top and sides of your sheet, or screen in this case, are numbered and lettered. Columns are labeled with alphabetically placed letters, and the rows are labeled with sequence numbers.
Although you don't see the names at their locations, the computer screen is actually filled with cells, like the little squares on a bookkeeping journal. And each cell or square is a coordinate position, which means that each cell is under a certain letter and across from a certain number.
So, a cell under the column labeled D and across from the row number 5 would have an address of D5, the column letter followed by the row number, like a map or a street guide.
And the keyboard is our vehicle for moving around to the various addresses. Learning to use the arrow keys properly is very important because that's your mode of travel in Lotus. If you have a separate set of keys for your arrow keys, then you can enter numbers with a number keypad and use the arrows as you need. The num-lock key activates the numeric keypad.
But if your only arrows are on the set of keys on the numeric keypad, Be sure to place the num lock key off and just use the arrow keys as arrows. And when you need numbers, use the numbers at the top of the letter key set.
Trying to remember when to turn the numeric keypad on or off and when the arrows are activated or the numbers are activated can be frustrating. It's just simpler to get used to one way and stick with it.
The arrow keys move the highlighted cell cursor in the direction of the arrow that you push.
And, like having several sheets of paper ready to use when preparing financial analysis, Lotus has lots more capacity on one worksheet than you see on the screen at any given moment.
The maximum capacity of Lotus 123 is 256 columns across and 8,192 rows down. Which means you could move into view 13,000 other screens, just like the first one you see when you log in the program.
You may not need or use that much capability, but it's nice to know it's there.
It is possible that you may need to use more than one page, however, and you may want to move from one section of cells to another section of cells instead of just going along one cell at a time.
There are keys to help you move around the worksheet easier. For example, the Home key will take you to cell A1, the first cell in the worksheet, and the End key, pushed before the arrow key, will move you to the end of a row or column. Like if you push the End key, then the right arrow key, you will go from column A, row 1, to column IV, column 256, in the same row. And then the End key, then the down arrow key, will take you to row 8,192, way down on the bottom of the same column.
The highlighted bar signals which is the active cell, or in other words, is the cell where you may enter data.
Other fast movement keys are the ones labeled as page up and page down, which moves you a page at a time instead of a cell at a time up and down. And the control key held down while you push the side-to-side arrows causes the same page at a time movement, only in a left and right direction.
Now you can move around your electronic spreadsheet.
So let's enter some data. You know, Lotus is very careful when it comes to entering letters or numbers. If the data you enter begins with letters, it assumes that you are entering text, and 123 calls that labels. For instance, if you enter the word name as the name of a column, Lotus will place the word left-hand justified.
And if you enter short or long words, they are always left-hand justified, unless you tell Lotus to do otherwise.
If you enter 1,000, Lotus thinks it is a number that you will use to add or subtract, or do some calculations with.
All numbers will be right-hand justified like you do manually when you're listing numbers.
However, sometimes you have descriptions that start with numbers, but are meant to be text for reference and not numbers that you want to do calculations on. For instance, the time or date, or entering your Social Security number.
For example, if you entered a Social Security number and then pressed Enter, Lotus will accept the data and remain at that cell. Or you can press the appropriate arrow key and Lotus will move to the next cell you indicate.
But Lotus displayed a minus 842 because it thinks you are entering 465 minus 73 minus 1,234. It takes it as a formula, does the calculation, and shows the result.
To enter numbers as text, you begin with an apostrophe.
To enter a street address, say 134 Main Street, Lotus will enter an alarm because Lotus thinks you are entering letters by mistake in a number cell. To avoid this, you would enter an apostrophe and then the address.
Lotus will always think you are entering a number or a formula when the first character entered is a number, a plus, a minus, a leading parenthesis, or the @ symbol. Lotus uses the @ symbol to identify pre-programmed functions or formulas. If you are entering text that begins with any of those numbers or characters, remember to enter the single quote or apostrophe symbol.
You can run into the same kind of errors when entering cell names in a formula. Let's say you wanted a formula to add the amount entered in cell A2 plus the amount entered in cell A3. You would normally think to enter it simply as A2 plus A3, but Lotus thinks you're entering the name of something because the formula was incorrectly started with a letter.
Be sure that if it is a formula, you enter it as plus A2 plus A3. Using the plus sign in the first place tells Lotus that what follows is a formula and that A2 is the first cell position to consider.
Another way to do the same thing is enter the open parentheses, then the formula, and then close the parentheses as shown here. It is a must that when entering formulas using parentheses, you close your parentheses. Otherwise, the alarm will sound telling you there is a mistake.
You know, armed with just the information we've given you so far, you could now create your first financial or numerical model, but it isn't important to memorize all of these specific ideas that you see here.
You can view and review Logicware as many times as you want, and when you go to the computer, you can take your Logic notes with you.
Now let's look at how easy it is to apply what you've already learned as a beginner. Let's balance this checkbook.
Well, first let's label the columns.
In cell A1, we'll enter the word description. Under this column, we will enter either the word check or deposit.
Once we finish, we press the right arrow key to accept the data and move to the next cell column.
We'll label column B1 as check number and touch the right arrow again to go to the next column. Column C1 we'll label as deposit dollars, and D1 as check dollars, and E1 as balance. And we'll finish this column by hitting the down arrow.
Now, to go back to column A, we can either press the arrow key back in that direction several times, or we could press the end key and then the left arrow key. That would take us back to the first column.
When using the software the first few times, it's not usually a good idea to try shortcuts. Just do it the way you remember best. And later on, you can learn all of the tricks to make your tasks easier and faster.
Once we're back in cell A2, we can draw a line as a column limiter or definer.
We can use the minus sign or the dash. However, Lotus has a nice trick that fills any cell with a chosen character. Look how we can enter a backslash, then the desired symbol, and the cell is filled after we press the right arrow key to advance to the next cell.
Now, to enter the beginning balance, let's type beginning balance, and then toggle over to cell E3 and enter an amount. Let's say $1,000.
Now, let's enter a check. We'll need to go back to cell A4 and enter the word check, and then move to cell B4 and enter check number 100. Then to D4 and enter $65.55 as a check amount.
Now we'll move over to cell E4 and enter the first formula.
First, open a parentheses. Then enter E3, the beginning balance cell, the plus sign, C4, the deposit cell, which is 0 because we're entering a check, and then a minus sign, and then enter D4, the check amount, and then close the parenthesis.
Move towards cell A5. As you see, the new balance is displayed in cell E4 as $934.45.
Now at cell A5, we'll enter the word deposit. At column C5, we'll enter the amount of $500. If we wanted to go to column E5 and create a new formula similar to the previous one entered, we could get our new balance. But let's wait, and we'll show another way to create that formula a little later.
We can repeat this as many times as needed, just using Lotus 123 like a sheet of paper and a pencil and a calculator. The basic difference is that we use a new way to reference a cell by using a column and a row location or address. And instead of moving your pencil around from one place to another on the worksheet, we have arrow keys to position all of the numbers in the right places. It's really easy.
And all through the previous examples, we haven't used any of the tricks or shortcuts that Lotus has available that makes our numerical worksheet life much easier.
So, let's create a wish list. The first wish I would want is to make the width of a cell whatever size I wanted it. That way I could enter long text descriptions without the letters spilling into the next column. I also wish we could center a column label, and to quickly fill a cell with dashes to make column limiters, so that I wouldn't have to hit the same key again and again, and a wish to copy that cell over and over to the other cells.
How about a way to enter a formula just one time and be able to copy that formula from one cell to another? And a wish to be able to modify the contents of a cell without having to re-enter all the information again, just correct the part that's wrong.
And a wish that we could format the numbers so that they're displayed with a $sign.
And wish to be able to print all or a part of the contents of our spreadsheet or financial model. And then to be able to save the contents of our model and then retrieve the model from the disk at any time.
I wish we had help available anytime we wanted it. By just pressing one key, and instructions would appear that would help me recall what I was supposed to do next.
And a final wish to leave Lotus 123 and return to the operating system. As you learn to fulfill these wishes, you will be able to prepare most of the common home or office spreadsheet models.
And now, we're going to show you where you find all those wishes or routines, there in the Lotus menu structure.
Well, when Lotus 123 was created, a brand new routine selection approach was introduced, where the menu to the next needed routine was hidden until you needed it. And most of the spreadsheet functions are located within this menu structure.
To make the menu available to you, you have to enter the slash key. And after pressing the slash key, you see the main or principal menu. And as we show you how to move around the menu, don't try to memorize the keystrokes, just try to understand the logic behind them.
The menu commands are named for what they do, or what they cover. You may move from one option to another by using the right or left arrow key. And once you highlight the desired routine, just press the Enter key to access that option.
The fastest way to access a routine, however, is by pressing the first letter that identifies it. As a novice Lotus user, I always went through the arrow keys because Lotus displays the objective of each menu item when you highlight the options. It always helps me find the exact routine I'm looking for. I suggest you do the same thing. There'll be time to learn all of those fancy shortcuts.
Anytime and for whatever reason you want to get back from a particular menu to where you were before, you just press the Escape key.
And if you press the Escape key from a menu, you return to the previous menu until you get back to the cell where you originally entered the slash command.
If you have one of the other spreadsheet programs, the menu may be at the bottom of the screen, or it may present itself as a little window on the screen. However, they almost all work like Lotus 123. And if you follow these instructions, you'll be just fine. Now, let's collect on our wish list.
In our sample check register, we labeled one column Description. And the column is actually narrower than the title, and we want it to look good. So let's change the width of that column.
Lotus gives you two ways to do that. One way is to change the column width of all the columns on the spreadsheet, and the other is to change just the width of one column or a specific group of columns.
To begin this exercise, let's move the cursor and touch the slash key to access the main menu. Because we want to modify part of our worksheet, we select the Worksheet option. Now we can see that there is a Column option.
And if we move to the right to the Column command and press Enter, we have four other options: Set Width, Reset, Hide, and Display. We want to set a new column width, so we just press Enter. Now we see the current width of the column displayed at the top of the worksheet.
You can type the number of spaces you want, or an easier way is to press the right arrow key and the column width will increase one space at a time. And when you get to the desired width, press Enter again, and there you have it.
If you want it a little smaller, just move back with the left arrow key and press Enter again to accept the corrected width. As you see, column A has changed width.
To center the column's names or labels, select the Up caret key, the one above the number 6, and use it instead of the apostrophe when you enter the text.
To edit the values or text of a particular cell, we don't have to re-enter all of the cell data again.
We simply move to the desired cell location and press the F2 key. This will give us access to the contents of a cell so we can edit. From here, we can use the arrow keys to move around within the cell. Then, to change any part of a cell value, we can erase the incorrect entry by using the Delete key, which removes the character above the cursor, or you can use the Backspace key, which removes the character to left of the cursor. Then, just type in the characters you want to add, then press the Enter key. You have to use the Enter key to finish an entry when editing because the arrow keys move the cursor around within the cell.
We'll remove the single quote or apostrophe at the beginning of the label description, and then insert the Up caret and press Enter. The word description is now centered in the column. We can repeat the same process in the other columns.
Next wish. Maybe the single most used command in Lotus. Copy.
We always try to do more with less effort, and Lotus is great at that. You can copy the contents of one cell to another, or you can copy the contents of a cell to several contiguous cells, or you can copy several contiguous cells to others.
For instance, in our example, we can copy the content of cell A2 to cell B2 like this. Slash brings up the menu. Then we move over to Copy and press Enter.
The name of the cell we want to copy appears, and so we press Enter again. And then we go to where we want to copy this cell to by moving the cursor with the arrow key. Position to the desired cell, we press Enter again, and the copy is done.
We can also copy the same cell, A2, over cell B2, C2, D2, and E2 by doing almost the same thing. First, the menu, then select the original cell, copy, then Enter. Now we'll move to B2, the first destination cell, and press the period. That anchors the first cell. And when we move the cursor to the last cell we want to copy to, all of the target cells are highlighted. Once we have all the cells highlighted that we want to copy to, we hit the Enter key.
This range of cells concept is used quite often and is common to several other Lotus routines as well. The period is always used to anchor the first cell of the range. You can use the same approach for copying a group of cells.
In this case, you anchor the first cell with a period, then move the cursor to cover the range of cells you want copied and press Enter, then move to the destination cell.
If you are copying several cells and you position the highlighted bar in the first position of the destination cells, Lotus will use all of the necessary destination cells to accept and copy the data from the originally highlighted group of cells.
Be careful when you copy ranges of cells. If you overwrite a previously used cell, the previous contents will be lost.
It's within the power of our wish list to copy formulas, and the action to copy is exactly the same as earlier described.
For example, from the cell E4 position, we press slash for the menu, go across to copy, Enter, then select the cell, then Enter. Then move the arrow one cell down to cell E5 and press Enter again, and it's done. The formula is copied, but notice now that we have a new balance from our $500 deposit.
This is one of the most impressive capabilities of Lotus 123. The cell formula was copied, which means the previous balance plus deposit minus check equals the new balance. But if Lotus copied the exact same cell formula, it would be all wrong since it's been copied to a new row.
Well, Lotus knows that, and when you copy a formula, it adjusts to maintain the same cell relation in regard to its position, instead of the exact content of the formula. Impressive, isn't it?
Take a look at this graphic. The original formula contains cell references that are relational as far as their positions. The cell above, plus the cell 2 places to the left, minus the cell 1 place to the left. So when you copied it, it copied the relational positions, not the actual contents. As you see in the examples shown, there seems to be no consistency in the way the numbers are displayed. Numerals to the left of the decimal are sometimes not all shown. 80 cents is shown as 0.8 without the trailing zero.
Lotus is presently formatting numbers in the floating point calculator mode. It will display decimals only if they exist.
To avoid a mess, we can change the Lotus mode to a format that can be used on a range of cells, which means you can affect the whole spreadsheet, or you can just pick a small group of cells.
Call the Lotus menu. Select a worksheet-related topic. First worksheet, and the subtopic is global. Everything here affects the whole spreadsheet. Now press Enter. We're in the Format option.
You have many different options, but let's approach only the most commonly used ones. Fixed allows you to select how many decimals you wish to display on the screen. The default is 2 because that's the most common. However, you may change it from 0 to 15. Let's use 2 and see what happens. Perfect alignment.
Now, since we want to display large numbers with commas every 3 spaces, we'll select the comma option and the commas are inserted.
In addition to decimals and commas, we want to display the dollar sign, so we'll select the currency sign option, and now we get even more displays. But wait, what happened? A few lines just show a string of asterisks.
The problem is that the column width assigned by Lotus didn't have enough spaces for all of the added displays.
We'll call the menu, then Worksheet, then Global, then move to column width. You see the current setting is 9. We'll move the right arrow to increase it to 12, then Enter. All columns are whiter and the asterisks disappear. However, the description column that we set earlier wasn't altered because Lotus respects the other changes we made and only changes its own defaults.
You can modify the spreadsheet on a global basis or on a range of specific cells. Because changes can affect several contiguous cells, you should select the option Range for particular groups of changes.
From Range, you have 10 different options. The most used is Format, as you have just seen. Label will help you center column names in groups of columns and not one by one. Erase allows you to remove data or formulas entered in a cell or a range of cells. This is handy, but be sure you verify the cells you want to erase before you do it so you don't lose your work. The other options are used for more sophisticated tasks that you may use after you get more acquainted with Lotus.
To present the idea of global and range format, let's assign an option to insert a comma along with 2 decimals globally, but only a range area for the dollar sign to appear in the balance column and see how it looks.
This is the most common way to present financial data, and when we use 2 decimal places, the second decimal is always rounded off to the next highest or lowest figure. For example, 6.666 will be displayed as 6.67.
Now, let's say we wanted to add the total checks in the check column and the total deposits in the deposits column.
Well, we could enter a formula down at the bottom of the deposits column like C2 plus C3 plus C4 plus C5, etc. But if we had lots and lots of deposits, this could take quite a while.
Lotus has an addition function called sum that you place after the function symbol at. From cell C14 at sum, opening parentheses, C4, then C12, closing parentheses, would give you the sum of all of the cells in the deposit column through cell C12.
As you see, we have the total deposit.
Also, you could copy the formula in cell C14 over into cell D14, and it would look like this. This would give us the total of the checks column.
The at functions are handy tools, and the sum function is probably the most common.
Another wish list item was to be able to print our work. When you installed Lotus 123, you gave Lotus a print driver to communicate with the particular printer brand you have.
To print the contents of a worksheet, we select the print option from the menu, then choose print by pressing enter. You could send the same information to a file to be used by a word processor or save to be printed later.
Next, we'll select the range of cells we wish to print. The logic is the same as before when we copied ranges. We position the highlighted bar in the first cell to be printed, then press the period to anchor the first cell, then move to the last cell we want to include in the printing routine. Return to the print menu with enter. Then, with the range selected the first time, it will remain selected as the appropriate range until you select another one or modify it.
Now, we should adjust the paper in our printer, manually or with the line command from the menu. Lotus keeps track of the lines. To be sure that the count is reset to 0, we'll enter the align command and just select go, and the range selected is printed.
Because it's possible that the whole sheet was not used, we can select Option Page, and Lotus will advance the paper to the top of the next page. This also helps us retrieve the paper from the printer easily.
There are a few options to be aware of when printing your spreadsheets. For one, you can specify a header to be printed on each page of your work, or a footer.
You can also set the margins to use the most columns available for your printer, as well as more or less how many lines per page you want. The Borders command allows you to select a range of columns or rows of data. Normally, the row that contains the column names that you want printed on each page.
It's a common mistake to include the columns and rows that you selected in Borders in the range to be printed. It will print them twice. If this happens, just modify the range and print again.
If the range to print is wider than a single page, Lotus will print the worksheet on several pages. There are several utility programs, however, that will allow your printer to print sideways, so you can print your spreadsheet columns as wide as you want.
If your printer allows you to print in the condensed mode, you can enter the printer instructions to do this in the setup option. However, check your printer manual about this command sequence.
If you want, you can print the content of the spreadsheet to include the formulas by using other options in the print menu.
The content of a spreadsheet in Lotus is in the computer memory, and a loss of power or a computer failure may cause you to lose all of the work. To avoid this, be sure you save the information to the disk.
To do this, select the menu option File. Move to the sub-option Save, press Enter, and type in the file name. You can use up to 8 characters, no spaces, to name a file. Lotus will insert its extension, which will be identified by Lotus later. The default disk and default directory is offered, but you may modify it if you need to.
Always try to name a spreadsheet a logical name so you can recall it when you need it again. After you save the file, the control returns to the spreadsheet. Then, if you want to quit, select that option from the menu. Lotus asks you to confirm that you really want to leave and gives you a second chance to change your mind.
That second chance can be very important because if you forget to save your work, once you leave Lotus, everything that was in the memory will be lost, unless you save the spreadsheet to a disk. If you tell Lotus, yes, you really want to leave, you're back on the DOS prompt.
But say you want to retrieve a file from a disk. While still in the main menu, select Retrieve, then enter the file name and press Enter. The full spreadsheet will be placed on the screen and in memory. Now, if you want to retrieve a second file after the first one, be sure to save your first one, because the content of the screen and memory is replaced with the content of the new one.
If you can't remember the name you chose for your spreadsheet, you can select File from the menu, then Retrieve, and then hit the Enter key, and you can scroll your worksheet files on a one-line menu list from the top of the spreadsheet form. When you highlight the file you want, it loads into the memory.
And when you need help, press F1. From any place in the spreadsheet, and while you're doing just about any task, you can always ask for help. Lotus will guide you with generic instructions and hopefully help you remember the proper sequence.
The Help key has really been a lifesaver lots of times for me. Just remember to press F1 and page through the index to get even more help if you need it.
Just to mention some other options in the File menu, there is Combine that allows you to mix spreadsheets, one from RAM memory with one on a file disk. Extract, which allows you to save part of the spreadsheet by range selection.
There's Erase, which allows you to remove any file you don't want any longer. The List command displays on the screen all the files in a given disk or subdirectory.
The Import routine lets you bring in other files different than Lotus 123 files. And the Directory option allows you to establish or modify the default directory or subdirectory where Lotus will look for and save its files.
Lotus can create several different types of charts and graphs, and generally help you in many ways to manage information, not just calculate numbers. That's why it's called 123.
1, it's a spreadsheet. 2, it's a graph maker. And 3, it's a database with all kinds of management capabilities.
With all of the information presented here, you can do most of the normal spreadsheet applications for the home or office. It's time to get started. And all of the information presented here is complemented by Logic Notes, the companion booklet that is a handy portable reference to take to your computer.
Thanks for joining us.
And we hope to see you again in other Logicware presentations. So long.